When I was 13, the dawning of a new millennium took place on New Year's Eve. While people were fearing the worst with the Y2K bug or out partying and drinking, I was home alone. In 1996, my parents had split up, and from there they divorced, and my mother and I moved across the country from Oregon to Tennessee with her best friend. On the eve of the year 2000, I was home alone, and my mother was currently out of state. Now this didn't worry me, as this was not the first time. I often came home to find a note on the kitchen counter saying they had gone to Florida for a few days and that there were groceries in the fridge. Since the divorce, she was regularly leaving me alone for long periods of time to go to Florida. We lived on a relatively quiet road surrounded by trees and set a few miles out of town, and I knew most of the people, if not by name, then by face enough to wave and small chat with, and had never before been given a reason to be afraid of being alone. On the night in question, I was staying up late watching television. I remember I was watching the movie His Bodyguard on USA Channel and had most of the lights on in the house, not because I was afraid, but because at 13, I wasn't concerned with electricity bills or saving the environment. I felt completely safe and protected within my little bubble of home. As I was watching the movie, I kept hearing these weird sounds outside, but I remember thinking it was probably the neighbors. Though they weren't extremely close, a couple of them were having a party/people over for the holiday. About halfway into the movie, however, the power in the house suddenly went dead. I sat on the couch for a minute, just sort of in a panic daze, because it was near midnight and pitch black. I remember thinking the power must have gone out and that it would come back on, so I just decided to sit on the couch with my blanket and wait. A few minutes passed by when I heard a noise in the kitchen, where the back door is. My heart started racing in my chest because I thought it sounded like the back door being shut. The back door sits just off the dining room, which is connected to the kitchen, which leads directly into the living room, where I was currently sitting on the couch. A few seconds passed after I had heard the sound, and I was straining my ears to pick up anything that wasn't supposed to be there. Every noise suddenly felt magnified. When footsteps sounded on the floor, I immediately slithered off the couch onto all fours, crawled around the ottoman, and started as slowly and as quietly as I could make my way toward the space between the love seat and the couch. I knew I could fit under the side table and be completely hidden by the dark and the ottoman from playing hide-and-go-seek in the dark many times with my friends during sleepovers. I was nearly there when the footsteps became more apparent. I knew from the sound of them that whoever it was making their way through the kitchen now toward the living room. They weren't hurried or anything. It was like they were just moving around in the kitchen. I glanced up from where I was crouched on the floor, and to my horror, there was a dark silhouette standing in the archway between the two rooms. To my credit, I didn't scream. However, I did panic. I stood immediately to my feet from my hiding spot and ran down the hallway, and I believe the only reason I wasn't overcome was because the person chasing me had to get around the ottoman in the dark to follow me. I did what all children do when they're afraid, and I bypassed the front door, the guest bedroom, the bathroom, and ran to the farthest door down the hallway, my room. In all honesty, I probably wouldn't have been able to get the front door unlocked and open in time, as it was right off the side of the couch. When I was 10, I got a bird for my birthday. He was a blue-fronted Amazon, and I named him Boo because it was October and close to Halloween. Boo had a large iron cage. It could have been metal, but very large, sturdy, and like 6 feet tall. And it was kept in my room, despite the fact that Boo, like me, pretty much had the run of the house whenever he wanted. This information will become relevant later in the story. As I ran into the room, I slammed the door shut and locked it. However, the lock was simply one of those little turn knobs that you can easily pop with a butter knife. I had barely gotten the door shut and locked when the person on the other side knocked on it. I have no idea why they knocked, if they did it to mock me or to scare me, but I knew in my heart that my little lock was not going to keep whoever it was on the other side out of my room. It didn't keep my mother out when we were arguing, and it wouldn't stand up to brute force. I was panicking, on the verge of tears when the person started laughing. It was low, quiet, and because of that, it was even more frightening. It wasn't like manic laughter, but as if they were genuinely amused. It was the laughter that really frightened me, and I started heavily, hysterically crying and looking around my room to figure out what I could do. That was when I realized Boo's cage would fit almost perfectly between the door and the wall of my closet. The cage moved quietly on my carpeted floor, but as I pushed it into place, it scraped against the door and alerted whoever it was on the other side that I was trying to barricade myself in. because suddenly they threw themselves at my door, and you could hear the sound of the wood splintering and the door handle being twisted violently. Boo, who had been stirred by the movement awake, began literally screaming and flapping his wings. I might have screamed with him, but honestly, I don't remember screaming. I just remember being extremely scared. Terrified, I crawled under my bed couch, a bunk bed with a futon on the bottom, metal, and waited. Several minutes passed, and the person eventually stopped attacking my door. Boo continued screaming even after he had stopped. Though being under my bed gave me no feelings of being secure, I didn't come out from under it because I simply had nowhere else to go. I thought about trying to go out the window, but I was afraid he might expect it, and therefore be waiting for me on the other side, and it was also several feet off the ground, as the house was built on a raised foundation. I remember laying under my bed, terrified, for what felt like hours. I must have fallen asleep because I awoke the next morning to daylight. The fear of what happened came back to me as soon as I registered where I was and why, and scared that whoever had been in my house might still be there. I decided to crawl out the window and run to a neighbor since it was daylight outside, and therefore I felt less afraid. Crawling out a window is a lot harder than it looks, and I did it less than gracefully, as I was not, and still am not, the most coordinated human being. Once I was back on my feet, however, I carefully made my way around the house, and that's when I noticed that the back door was wide open. Scared, but feeling braver now that I was outside and that it was morning instead of a pitch-black night, I walked up the back steps and peered inside. Seeing nothing out of the ordinary, no terrifying man leering at me, basically, I decided to go inside. Looking back, I cringe on how stupid this could have turned out, and that I wish I could have told my younger self to make the smarter move and just go get help. But thankfully, no one was inside the house. I did a terrifying, heart-pounding room-to-room check, looking in closets and under beds, behind the couch, anywhere I thought even a small child might be able to fit. I even popped the lock on my mom's bedroom so I could check it, and then relocked it afterwards. When I was positive there was no one there, I went back to lock the back door. I had left it open in case I needed to escape, and noticed that the breaker box on the opposite wall was open. The main switch had been pulled. I flipped it back on, locked both locks on the back door, checked all the windows and front door, and then called my mom, where I once again broke down crying hysterically. She called a coworker, who came and stayed the entire day with me as they drove back. My mom still took random trips to Florida after that, but I always went with her from then on forward. So terrifying, laughing, crazy person that broke into my house on New Year's Eve. Please, let's never meet again. I sincerely hope no other young girl had to meet you either. I don't know if you were just some drunk visitor of a neighbor, but you terrorized me that night. I was afraid of being alone when my mom was working, and to this day I still get scared when I am home alone. Overthink what I would do if someone came inside, and where I would hide. When my cats make noise out of nowhere, I immediately investigate for fear it's someone trying to get in. P.S. My mom had to help lift me back into my bedroom window so I could move Boo's cage out of the corner between my bedroom door and closet. We never had another incident at the house, and we moved in town to an apartment a year later. This happened on New Year's Eve of 2021 when I was 17 on a now deleted app called It's Me. It was an app where you could talk to people all around the world without the fear of showing your face as you created your own animated avatar. Looking back, the app was a really enjoyable experience as I met people I'm still friends with today. But most people who used It's Me could agree that it could get toxic. Many users, including myself, trolled parties, which were basically live streams where a host could allow 3 other people to be talking with them, and the party's guests could comment in the chat. One time I was trolling a party when I was new to the app, and the host was, unbeknownst to me, quite notorious on the app and already had a large following. Before this, I'd never heard of the host, although I knew a couple of her friends. Her name was Kaylani, and mine was Selinez, not my real name. Usually, the people I trolled didn't have the reaction I wanted, but this host started arguing back, and we went back and forth for a while, with the party getting many guests, and the comments were going wild. After the party, I texted her on the app, going back and forth with her again, until we were full on beefing, and I asked her to pull up. Really, I didn't want to fight this girl because I was only arguing with her in the first place for shits and giggles, but she was taking me serious. She told me she lives in Chicago, and I live in Milwaukee, so I thought there's no point in driving 1.5 hours just to fight a girl that I've never even met. At the time, I was stupid and still had the mindset of a hood rat, so me pulling up to this girl wasn't far-fetched. It got to the point where this bitch wouldn't shut up, so I did something I still regret to this day. I told her I'd meet her at her place if she was with it, and she accepted. I hopped in my car and put her address in the GPS. Not gonna lie, the apartment building she lived in looked sketchy and ghetto, but I didn't really care because I also was from the hood. I brought my twin sister with me, just in case Kaylani had people with her to jump me. As we pulled up, I saw a girl who looked to be Hispanic and had sneakers and a hoodie on, so I presumed it was her because of her accent and her clothes. I told my sister to wait in the car because she looked to be alone. I ran up to her and we started fighting. Not to brag or anything, but I've been in many fights growing up in the hood, so I do know how to defend myself properly. To be honest, I was getting the best of her when out of nowhere, some guy proceeds to pick me up and try and separate us. At first I thought it was some kind of security of the apartment building, but he wasn't wearing any kind of uniform or anything. Actually, he looked quite a mess looking back, and he reeked of alcohol too. He managed to somehow separate us, even though at this point I was going batshit crazy, and Kaylani was still trying to get little hits in. By this time, my sister came out of the car when she saw the guy getting involved, and presumably Kaylani's friends who came from inside the building trying to hold her back. After we were separated, the guy literally starts dragging me to a rusty, beat-up black Honda that was parked nearby. I started fearing for my life and screamed my sister's name. She came sprinting, but the guy had already opened the trunk and threw me in, trying to shut the trunk. I was kicking and screaming, but he was really strong and managed to shut the trunk. My heart practically stopped when I felt the car speed off. I can still remember my sister's screams for help. We drove for 5 minutes, and I'm claustrophobic, so I was frantically trying to get out the tiny trunk. I was texting my sis, and luckily she informed me she had called the police already, and she was following the car. After a few minutes, the car stopped, and he lifted the trunk and dragged me by my hair into some house that looked run down and dirty from the outside. He practically threw me into the house, and I saw my sister running after the guy with a baseball bat we brought, just in case anything bad was to happen. She managed to get one good hit on the man with the bat, but he kicked her off and locked the door. Even though I heard sirens nearby, I was still terrified of what he was going to do to me. He dragged me into some room in the back of the house, and the whole time I was fighting him off as best I could. The police burst in a couple seconds later, however, and tackled the man. Surprisingly, he didn't resist and was quite calm, letting them handcuff him. I was reunited with my sister, and in that moment I realized how precious life can truly be. Ever since that day, I changed for the better. Me and my sister no longer beef with anyone, and we've definitely grew up in the past year. After the incident, Kaylani left the app. I decided to call it Quits Me soon after as well, because many people I was cool with starting moving on, and I wanted to leave the memory of that day behind. I never told anyone on It's Me what happened, not even my friends, as I was afraid no one would believe me. So if there's anything to take away from this story, it's to not make dangerous decisions like I did that day, pulling up to a sketchy neighborhood to fight a stranger. The It's Me app was shut down on August 10th of this year and was replaced with a new app, Codename. Recently, I moved back to England with my sister, and we both go to an amazing college here. I hope you all stay safe and have a Merry Christmas and an even better New Year. For reference, I was 17 at the time and in my senior year of high school. I'm a male, and I am about 5'10" and weighed about 160 pounds at the time. I lived in the suburbs, and I was at a New Year's party being held by my friend at his house, which was a 20-minute walk away from my house. It was about 1 a.m, and I was about to leave with another friend of mine who lived on the same block as me. My friend who was hosting the party asked if we would like a ride home, and in hindsight, we probably should have accepted his offer, but our neighborhood was pretty safe, and we figured that with the two of us walking together, no one would bother us. Plus, there were probably other people at the party who needed a ride home more than we did. We said our goodbyes to everyone and began our walk home. The road was predictably empty, with no one but us walking along the sidewalk and maybe the occasional car passing by. It was pretty well lit though, so we weren't walking in complete darkness. My friend wanted to pick up a pack of cigarettes on the way home, so we stopped off at a gas station along the way. When we got to the gas station, it was nearly empty, with only a woman at a pump filling up her car with gas and a guy posted up in front of the store on his phone. We went inside and my friend picked up a pack of cigarettes. We walked out of the store and my friend immediately lights a cigarette. We reach the sidewalk and we hear someone behind us yell, "Hey, wait!" We looked behind us to see the guy who was in front of the store quickly walking towards us. He looked to be in his early to mid-20s. He was probably about 5'8" and maybe 140 pounds from the looks of him. He approached us and asked if he could get a light. My friend and I didn't think much of it, and he lit the guy's cigarette. The guy thanked him and my friend said, "You're welcome." We began walking away when the guy continued to follow us, asking where we were going. We told him we were heading home and asked him where he was going. He said his friends were at a party, and he was heading back over there as he left to get some fresh air for a bit. He asked us if we wanted to come to the party. This is officially the point where red flags start going off with this guy. Why the hell would a guy in his 20s ask two teenage boys if they wanted to go to a party with him? We told him bluntly that we didn't even know who he was, nor did we know anyone at the party he was talking about, so we weren't going. He starts laughing and says that we seemed like cool guys to party with. He told us we needed to let loose a little. My friend and I told him we were 18 and 17 respectively, to see if maybe that would get him to leave us alone. He chuckled and said that age didn't matter to him, and that he had a brother who was 16, and that he partied with him and his friends all the time. Jesus Christ, can this guy take a hint? I thought to myself. We were a little less than 10 minutes away from our houses, and we didn't want this creep following us all the way there. I told him firmly, "Dude, we're not going anywhere with you. Now quit following us and fuck off." He gets livid and starts screaming at us for being unfriendly, inconsiderate assholes, and that he was just trying to be nice. He then starts throwing racial slurs at my friend. It's probably worth mentioning by now that I'm white and my friend is black. My friend yells at him to get away from him before he cracks him in the face, and the guy proceeded to run away from us. My friend and I looked at each other in complete disgust over what happened and spent the next 5 minutes walking and talking about the creepy guy. We both agreed that he was probably drunk or high from a New Year's party. Next thing we know, we hear a car behind us and proceed to slow down to match our pace. We see the windows roll down, which revealed the guy we had just seen a few minutes earlier, with who we presumed to be two of his friends, one of which was a man who was probably the same age as the guy, and a woman in the back seat who had to have been in her mid-30s. The guy tells us that we got off on the wrong foot and asked us once again to join them at the party. My friend and I looked at each other, and I whispered to him that we needed to get away from them. My friend tells them that we're not going with them and to leave us alone already. The guy was silent for a few seconds and said, "You're coming with us, one way or another." They pull over and quickly get out of the car, which caused my friend and I to immediately go into flight mode. We turned right on a side block and my friend yelled, "Run to the park! We'll lose them in there." We looked behind us and to our horror, the three people were running right for us. We run into the park and we once again look behind us and they're getting closer. We run into the dark, thick patch of trees that covered a good portion of the west side of the park, hoping to evade them. I was panicking at this point because I couldn't see a damn thing, and I was worried that my friend and I would trip over something and get captured by one of those sick freaks who wanted to do who knows what with us. We hear one of them trip and fall behind us yelling, "Fuck!" And luckily we see light again and we made it to another path in the park and we made a left onto the path. We heard yelling behind us and one of the guys said that they lost us. The woman yells to split up and search around the park for us. We bolt toward the bathrooms, which thankfully were open, and we hide inside. We took a minute to catch our breath as our lungs were practically burning at that point. We should have called the cops and just hid until they got there, but at the time we were so focused on getting the hell away from those crazy people that we decided to try and make our way to the nearest exit out of the park and run to my house. We waited for about 2 minutes and we bolted out of the bathroom and toward the park exit. Shortly before we exited the park, we heard one of the guys yells behind us that he found us and we were getting away. We looked behind us to see the guy in the distance starting to chase after us. We ran until we reached my house and I quickly opened the door. We ran inside and I quickly locked it. We went into my living room and collapsed on the couch. We both sat there silently, trying to regain our energy and calm down after what had happened, hoping they didn't see where we ran to. I looked out the window several times over the course of 10 minutes, and thankfully, they never showed up again. We talked about it, and we were glad that we were both okay and that nothing bad happened to us. We were trying to figure out what they wanted with us, Did they want to kill us, rob us, have sex with us? God only knows. My friend hung around for another half hour before he insisted on heading home. He left, and then I went to bed. I kept thinking about what had happened and pondered on what would have happened if they caught me. Even as I'm typing this, I still have those thoughts. I eventually fell asleep, and I woke up and told my parents what had happened. They were thankful that my friend and I were okay, but were upset with us that we chose to walk home and should have accepted the lift from my other friend or even called them and they would have picked us up. Regardless, we filed a police report, and I gave them all the information I could. Unfortunately, we never heard anything about it again, and I wonder sometimes what the hell they've been doing ever since. I really hope they never harmed another person after that. I can't express enough how thankful I am that we managed to get away from those freaks, and to this day, this incident is still the scariest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. This incident definitely made me more wary of my surroundings, and I try my best to avoid situations where I need to walk late at night. Whether I'm by myself or not, I don't know what would have happened had those people got their hands on me, but I do know one thing. I never want to meet those people, ever again.